There comes a moment in every life when the script we've been rehearsing suddenly falls apart. The relationship we thought would last ends. The dream job loses its color. The future we built in our mind dissolves. And in that silence, where plans no longer make sense, something sacred begins to whisper. It's not the voice of failure. It's the voice of redirection. Because sometimes, when life stops going the way we planned, it's actually making room for the version of ourselves we were always meant to become. We spend so much of our lives believing that if we plan carefully enough, if we make the right choices, if we build the right life, everything will fall into place. It's the myth we've all inherited, the illusion that certainty is earned by effort. We design timelines in our heads where we should be by 30, who we should be with, what success should look like. We convince ourselves that control equals safety, that a plan equals purpose. But life, with its quiet mischief, has a way of undoing the structures we cling to. It's not cruel, it's simply honest. Because while our plans come from what we know, life unfolds from what we're meant to learn. The truth is, our plans are often born from fear as much as from hope. We plan so we don't have to face the discomfort of not knowing. We plan so we can feel valuable, competent, in charge. Yet, the more tightly we hold to that illusion, the more painful it becomes when life refuses to obey. Maybe the relationship ends before we're ready. Maybe the career that defined us no longer feels like home. Maybe the version of ourselves we once admired starts to feel like a costume. And when that happens, we often call it failure. But it's not failure, it's friction. It's the soul rubbing against the limits of its old identity. Life is not a straight line. It's a conversation between what we want and what we need, between our plans and life's unfolding truth. When the plan stops working, it's not because you've done something wrong. It's because something deeper in you has outgrown the script. You're being invited to expand into a version of life that your old plans couldn't imagine. But most of us fight this. We resist change because we mistake uncertainty for danger. Yet, uncertainty is not danger. It's invitation. It's the space where new possibilities can breathe. When life interrupts your plan, it's easy to panic, to scramble for solutions, to cling to what once made sense. But sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is stop fixing and start listening. Maybe the plan isn't broken. Maybe it's just complete. The plan got you here, it did its job. It gave you structure, direction, something to build upon. But now, life is asking you to trust what you can't map out, to follow a path that can't yet be seen. There's something profoundly humbling about realizing that control is not the same as clarity. Control wants to predict. Clarity wants to perceive. Control says, I know where I'm going. Clarity says, I'm willing to see where this leads. And that shift from control to curiosity is where growth begins. Because the moment your plan ends is the moment life starts speaking a language you were too busy to hear before. When the life you planned stops working, don't call it the end. Call it the turning point. Because that's exactly what it is. The place where your plans end and your true life quietly begins. There is a sacred space that exists between what was and what will be, a quiet in between that most of us rush to escape. When something ends, a dream, a relationship, a chapter of life, we immediately look for the next thing to fill the emptiness. We search for distractions, for explanations, for ways to make the discomfort go away. But the truth is, the space between loss and becoming is not a void to be filled, it's a passage to be lived. It's where transformation takes root, not through doing, but through allowing. We are conditioned to believe that movement equals progress, that healing means getting over something as fast as possible. But in reality, the pause is not the problem, it's the process. The in-between is the fertile ground where the old self begins to dissolve, making room for what's next to be born. Yet, it feels unbearable at times, doesn't it? That uncertainty, that sense of floating between who you were and who you're becoming. It's a space without labels, without clarity, where the familiar has fallen away and the new has not yet arrived. And that's precisely why it's so powerful, because it's raw, unpredictable, and deeply human. This is the moment when time feels both suspended and heavy. You might find yourself asking questions that have no immediate answers. You might wake up with a quiet ache, feeling unanchored. And that's okay. That ache is the sound of growth echoing through your being. It's your soul expanding beyond its old boundaries. The in-between asks for patience, for trust, for the willingness to sit in the dark long enough for your eyes to adjust. And when they do, you start to see that endings are not empty. They are rich with meaning, waiting to be understood. Sometimes what's being asked of you in this space is stillness. Not resignation, but surrender. It's a different kind of strength, the kind that doesn't push forward but stays present. You begin to notice the small shifts, how your thoughts soften, how your priorities begin to change, how you start to hear your own voice more clearly now that the noise of the old life has quieted. It's in this stillness that wisdom takes shape. You realize that what's being built within you is not just resilience, it's depth. The in between is not the absence of direction, it's the preparation for alignment. The version of you that's emerging needs silence to gather strength, needs emptiness to find authenticity. You can't rush this part, because this is where you become acquainted with your truth, the one not defined by plans, roles, or expectations. So instead of rushing to rebuild what was, trust the pause. It's not a detour from your life, it is your life. This is where the becoming begins, not in certainty, but in the gentle unfolding of what's real. We often think grief only belongs to death, to loss in its most visible form. But there's another kind of grief that lingers quietly beneath the surface. The grief for the life we thought we'd have. It's the grief that comes when a dream dissolves, when a version of our future no longer exists, when the person we imagined ourselves becoming suddenly disappears. It's a grief that's hard to name because there's no ritual for it, no condolences, no public mourning. Yet, it can break us open in ways that are just as profound as any other loss. When life doesn't go according to plan, we tend to bypass the pain. We rush to say things like, "It happened for a reason," or "Something better is coming." And maybe that's true, but it doesn't make the loss any less real. Because before you can see what's ahead, you have to allow yourself to honor what's gone. You have to stand in the quiet truth that something once deeply meaningful has ended. It could be a relationship that felt like home, a career that gave you identity, a dream that shaped your choices. And when those things slip away, part of you feels like it goes with them. That's the part we often overlook. We think we can simply move on, but moving on without grieving is just pretending. You can't start a new chapter if you're still clinging to the sentences of the old one. Grief isn't the enemy of healing. It's the doorway to it. It's how we acknowledge that something mattered. It's how we make peace with the gap between what we wanted and what actually is. This kind of grief doesn't ask for logic, it asks for honesty. It asks you to sit with your memories, to feel the disappointment, the confusion, even the anger. To say, yes, I wanted that life. I dreamed of that future. And it didn't happen. That's not weakness, that's truth. And truth is what sets us free to live again. When you let yourself feel the depth of that loss, you begin to discover the parts of you that were never dependent on the plan. You start to see that even though something has ended, you are still here, breathing, feeling, evolving. Grieving the life you thought you'd have is not about letting go of hope. It's about letting go of illusion. It's about realizing that the future you imagined served its purpose. It gave you direction, motivation, meaning. But now, a new meaning is asking to emerge. And you can't receive it if you're still holding on to what was. So give yourself permission to mourn what didn't happen. Cry for the plans that unraveled, the moments you'll never live, the versions of yourself that never came to be. Because grief, when honored, becomes gratitude. It softens you. It deepens you. It reminds you that even in loss, life is still moving, still calling you forward. And that's when you begin to understand. The end of what could have been is not the end of you. There is a moment in every ending when we feel an instinctive pull to hold on. We cling to what's familiar, not because it still fits, but because it once did. Control becomes our shield, our way of protecting ourselves from the chaos of not knowing what comes next. We think if we just try harder, if we fix it fast enough, if we hold on long enough, we can make things right again. But control, when born from fear, doesn't create safety. It creates resistance. It traps us in a cycle of struggle against what life is already trying to change. Letting go is terrifying because it feels like losing identity. We say, if I'm not this person anymore, then who am I? We associate surrender with defeat, as if releasing something means giving up. But surrender isn't collapse, it's alignment. It's the moment we stop wrestling with what is and start listening to what's becoming. It's when we realize that control is not the same as power. Control demands that everything obey our expectations. Power trusts that even what we can't control can still serve our growth. Sometimes life removes what we refuse to release. It's harsh, but it's also honest, because life will not let us stay in spaces that limit our evolution. The job that drains you, the relationship that no longer nurtures you, the version of yourself you keep outgrowing. These things start to fall away not to punish you, but to free you. Yet we hold on, convincing ourselves that staying the same is safer than stepping into the unknown. We think that if we could just control the timing, the outcome, the emotion, we wouldn't have to face the uncertainty. But control doesn't stop the storm. It only keeps you from learning how to dance in the rain. Real freedom begins when you stop asking life to match your plans and start trusting it to reveal your truth. This is not easy. It takes courage to loosen your grip when every instinct tells you to tighten it. But there's a quiet grace that comes with surrender, a deep exhale after years of holding your breath. You start to see that life has never been against you. It's been guiding you all along. The more you release your need to manage every detail, the more room you give for possibility to enter. Surrender is not about giving up. It's about giving in to wisdom, to flow, to faith in something greater than your fear. It's the space where acceptance becomes liberation. Because when you stop trying to control what's already shifting, you stop breaking your own heart. And maybe that's the secret. The moment you stop fighting the change is the moment you discover that letting go was never about losing. It was about coming home to yourself. When the life you planned ends, what often follows is not just emptiness. It's unexpected beauty, though you rarely recognize it at first. In the beginning, all you can see is what's gone. You look at the pieces of what used to be your life, scattered across your memory, and you wonder how any of it could possibly make sense again. But slowly, as the noise of loss quiets, something remarkable begins to unfold. You start to notice the small moments that don't fit into your old plans, but somehow feel right anyway. The laughter that returns unexpectedly. The opportunities that come uninvited. The people who enter your life not by design, but by grace. These are the unexpected gifts that only appear once the illusion of control has fallen away. We rarely realize it, but so much of what we once called purpose was built around performance. We chase stability, validation, and belonging through plans that often reflected who we thought we were supposed to be. But when those plans collapse, what remains is the truth of who we are underneath all the striving. You begin to rediscover what actually nourishes you, what brings peace instead of pressure, what feels alive instead of expected. The unplanned moments reveal a wisdom that no structure ever could. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive wrapped in endings. The heartbreak that broke you open might become the reason you learn to love differently. The job you lost might force you to find your voice. The rejection that shattered your confidence might guide you toward authenticity. These moments don't look like gifts at first because they come disguised as loss. But over time, you begin to see that they weren't detours. They were directions. They were life's way of saying, you were meant for something more honest, something more aligned. The beauty of the unplanned life is that it asks you to trust what you can't predict. It teaches you to live in rhythm with your own unfolding rather than racing toward a fixed destination. You begin to notice how peace replaces urgency when you stop chasing what's meant to find you. The unexpected gifts are not just the external changes. They're the internal shifts, the calm that replaces fear, the openness that grows where control once lived, the compassion that deepens for yourself and others. You start to move through life with a softer strength, knowing that not everything that falls apart needs to be fixed. Some things are meant to free you. It's a quiet realization, but a powerful one. The life that begins after the plan ends is not lesser. It's more real. It may be smaller in structure, but it's larger in meaning. It doesn't always look like what you imagined, but it feels like truth. And maybe that's the greatest gift of all. That what once felt like an ending was really just life, lovingly rearranging itself to fit the person you were always meant to become. There comes a moment, often quietly and without fanfare, when you stop needing everything to make sense. You stop replaying what went wrong, stop rewriting the past in your mind, and start asking a different kind of question. Not, why did this happen to me? But, what is this teaching me? That shift may seem small, but it changes everything. It turns pain into wisdom, endings into beginnings, and confusion into clarity. It's the moment you realize that you are no longer a character trapped in a story. You are the author, pen in hand, writing the next chapter with intention rather than reaction. Rewriting your story doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means reclaiming the meaning behind it. Every disappointment, every failure, every loss, it all becomes material for growth. You start to see that the things that once broke you actually built you. The mistakes weren't detours, but mirrors reflecting who you were at that moment and showing you what still needed to be understood. Life, in its strange wisdom, uses every experience to deepen you. The pain wasn't meant to define you. It was meant to refine you. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you stop waiting for closure from the outside world and begin giving it to yourself. You realize you can rewrite the ending of a story that once made you feel powerless. You can decide that the chapter that ended isn't the full book. It's just the preface to something more honest, more awake. You stop trying to become who you used to be and instead begin to embrace who you're becoming. That's when resilience stops being something you perform and becomes something you embody. Rewriting your story also means taking responsibility for your voice. Not the voice of fear or the voice of expectation, but the voice that comes from truth. It's quiet but steady. It knows what it needs, and it's not afraid of silence anymore. You begin to notice how your choices start aligning differently, less out of obligation, more out of authenticity. You stop seeking validation and start seeking peace. You stop trying to be understood by everyone and start understanding yourself. And as you do, you realize that the life that's emerging is not built on certainty, but on presence. You no longer need to know how it all ends to trust that it's leading somewhere meaningful. You've lived through enough endings to know that life has a way of renewing itself. You've learned that loss doesn't mean it's over. It means you've evolved. So, when you reach that point, when you can look at everything that fell apart and see not destruction but design, That's when you know you've rewritten your story. And maybe, just maybe, that's when you finally understand that the end of the life you planned was never the end at all. It was the beginning of the life that was always waiting for you.